Welcome back. I know you're all dying to know how that music finishes, but I can't leave it to go for just those few seconds because it just means awkwardly sitting here looking at you for those remaining little bits. So we got the music, and there it is. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I hope this finds you well. Bob, how are you, sir? I hear you've been under the weather of late.
Yeah, not been feeling too good. Haven't done much this week, but yeah, I'm good now. Thanks. Yourself?
I mean, other than the almost eternal exhaustion from the years of sleep debt that I carry, it's I don't know that I'll ever catch up, but yeah, I'm feeling good now. A lot much better than I was a couple of weeks ago, and raring to get back at some decent conversations that we have about behavioural intelligence, even though some people in the world deny its existence.
Yeah, enough
Right,
said.
that's it. So on today's agenda for everyone that's tuning in live and everyone that catches this after the fact, we have a consideration for I believe the terminology is cross-cultural communication, and it's something that I'm lucky enough to get to deal with regularly because of where I work, but also because I'm learning multiple languages. So I get to interact with many people from many different cultures and many different backgrounds on an almost daily basis. And it seems to be that there is this. I'm struggling to find a less fancy word than dichotomy between collectivism and individualism in terms of cultures that focus on the individual versus cultures that focus on the group and how their interactions are framed accordingly, one way or the other. So, if you look at the notion of I think it's fair to reference that we as English folks are often considered to be quite rude and quite strict at times, and we also seem to have quite a thin tolerance for rudeness as well. So the observation that's on the table here is whether rudeness is a potential mismatch at times, and where the meaning of the information is encoded one way or the other. So you've got more individual leaning cultures, the United States being the prime example, where meaning is encoded primarily in explicit language. Whereas in more collectivist leaning cultures, England, and certainly more towards the Orient as well, meaning is very much distributed across context, across timing, and across relational history. You know, that buzzword of look at the baseline behavior. When we're thinking about the context for how people interact with each other, given that how varied the cultural community is all over the world nowadays, this is a consideration that needs to be made, right? Bob, what are your thoughts on this kind of interaction?
Yeah, the way the frame that I've always used for it is high context cultures and low context cultures.
Nice.
Obviously, in the UK, we live in a low context culture, and firsthand, I've had experience of how strange it is working with a Japanese company. I found it very hard to start with to get a level of how to communicate with them. There's the Japanese culture is very much a high context culture. It's all built on hierarchy of people within it.
Mm,
You defer to your seniors in
yeah.
business and in life,
Mm,
and I found that really hard. Because it takes a while to orientate yourself, and you're
certainly.
quite right. If you were to go by what is commercially available about
Mm,
how you read behavior, you'd be
mm,
completely lost. Because I know, I've got no shame of saying it. I was totally lost to start with because it just didn't conform
mm,
to the behaviours that I imagined that would work. And it's similar wherever you go. I mean, I've worked a lot in Europe. I worked for the European Union for a while, so I was going around to a lot of Eastern European countries
yeah.
where they're a bit of a hybrid, and some of them are more Western, and
Yeah.
some of them are more, so that's low context, and some of them are more high context.
Mm.
And the difference between it is unique, and it comes down to when you're delivering courses about whether they're going to laugh at the jokes you make.
Yeah.
And even if they do laugh at the jokes, are they actually getting the jokes? Or are they just lying to be laughing to be um, polite?
Yeah.
Because politeness is a bridge, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
um, it's everything from, I'm very British, especially um, in respect of, I'm quite humble. I don't
Mm.
like to talk about myself, so I'm pretty understated. So in that way, I'm very British.
Mm.
But we shift to say to Australia, and it's all about humour, isn't it? They cover their
Yeah.
sort of self. If they've got a low self or to actually engage in a conversation, they'll use humour.
Mm.
That goes down okay here, but it probably doesn't go down so well with high context cultures because it doesn't work with them
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And
or work so well.
well, one way or the other, it will depend on the cultural interactions that are happening. And I was it's funny that you should mention Australia. I was kind of afforded a great way of tracking that as my uncle, my mum's brother, obviously born in Stoke-on-Trent, but emigrated to Australia quite early on. So from as early as I can remember him, I got to see the change in his behaviour when either we'd go there or he'd come to us, from how much the living within that humour as life kind of
Mm.
approach seems to be. It was always jocular. It was always jovial. There was always humour to be found, but in the pleasant sense. Whereas one can argue that in the UK we're a little more fond of finding humour in satire or
Mm.
sarcasm, or
Mm. Yeah.
the drier of wits, the Blackadders of the world, and beyond. But to get to that original question, it makes me think, especially around something as, and I kind of hate to use the word because it's a bias against those with thinner skin, but the triggering notions of rudeness, in that when something feels rude, are you, we, I, the group, whatever it is, are we responding to the words, or to a violation of how we learned the context rules for the particular situation that we're in?
Mm.
Whereas, most people, certainly in my peer group, and beyond, I would imagine similar happens as well. When you go to a restaurant, say, you are respectful. You might drink your drinks and eat your food and everything else, but you keep the noise down. You don't really want to make a fuss. You ask questions if need be about how long food's going to be, or where the drinks are. That normal type of conversation. You eat. You hopefully enjoy yourself. You pay your bill, and on you go. Whereas if you get to some of the differing parts of certainly when I had experience of France, but like out of the modernity of France, I went to a competition out in Nevers, which is right in the middle of nowhere, and
Mm.
even out in the proverbial sticks, it was all a conversation and togetherness and volume and touching and tactile at the dinner table, and everyone's having a great time, as opposed to just, I'll hold it up a little higher, as opposed to just the polite chit chat of
Mm.
of England. And it was interesting to observe those two particular situations, because they were essentially the same. It was a group of either friends and or family out at a restaurant, but there were these kind of cultural
Yeah.
influences that kind of get you towards what the norm is in that situation. So getting back towards the question, we learn more about ourselves, right, when we go, that's rude, and nobody else seems affected, offended, bothered, or anything else. And it
Mm.
comes back to that mantra that, I mean, I imagine you've got similar stories, but at the very least has guided me in my working life. Is, it's not about me. right? So
Mm.
when I'm working or observing or interacting or whatever it is, it's not about me. I'm there to receive information. If I'm putting the order out there first, then I'm going to be jumping to conclusions more likely than I am seeing the information for precisely what's there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's true. When I'm coaching or when I'm delivering courses or programs, I always refer to myself as a facilitator, and it's guided
Yeah,
discovery. It's a
yeah,
guided discovery for me to learn about them, to allow them to guide themselves to discovery as well. So
mm,
it's a double thing, and I think that works well. The things that I think that I steer away from, um, especially in the early stages of speaking with any type of people, really, is to keep my opinions to myself and ask them for their thoughts and feelings,
mm,
because I think that works well. Because opinions, um, because we're from a low context culture, I think opinions sort of have become part of who we are. We have opinions. We're very opinionated, aren't we? You only got to
mm.
look at the internet after a football match or whatever to see all of the
Yeah,
managers telling what you've done wrong and everything. But
yeah,
we've got to be careful because a culture, a high context culture, that, if they see you as a certain status, then that can be quite damaging, and they'll
mm,
never let you know. I remember speaking with, with a bank, I think it was, sort of saying to them that, if you're dealing with a high context culture, it must be difficult in business because
mm,
if they see you as a higher level than them, then they're going to agree with you, even if they disagree with you, because it's frowned upon to show disagreement with someone of that nature.
yeah, yeah.
And and I think that's, it comes across in all sorts of areas, but I think that's one of them. But like I said earlier, is politeness, I've always found, is a bridge
Mm,
into high context and low context. And like you say, just remember that you're just, the best way to be in the work that we do, but also in general life, is just to be a sounding board, allow
yeah,
other people. We always get this thing that we've got to run conversations and we've got to
mm,
dominate them to run them.
mm,
But actually listening, and that to me is what behavioural assessment's about. It's not about all this other stuff. It's about building good relationships and having good
mm,
conversations, because they're where people walk away thinking, "Wow, that guy got me," or
yeah,
"They he understood me," and
mm,
that's what we all need, isn't it?
100%,
No matter what culture we're from, we've all got that part of us that we've got our
100%,
wants and needs, and one of them is to feel safe and secure in our communication with other people.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And it's, yeah, the thing that's always been kind of almost enjoyable for how revealing it is, as to this kind of high context, low context example, is if you ask some, I mean, it's obviously got to be relevant towards the conversation, but you'll get the idea for the type of question I mean, is if you ask someone what they do for a living.
Yeah.
There are those people that will say, I'm a builder. And there are other people that will say, well, I'm head of construction for a local corporation.
Mm.
Right? Two different versions of the same thing with two different degrees of context. And whereas, depending upon where you come from, you might, the proverbial you, not specifically you, Bob, but the proverbial you might be more inclined to go to, woo, aren't you all fancy and arrogant and egocentric? But from the person's position that's saying it, they might just be going, well, that's my job title.
Mm.
That is the title of the job that I do for a living. That's the answer to your question. So this is the interesting lens that we're trying to get into in those particular situations. Like you spoke about the advice being to lead, and it normally is. Take charge, blah blah blah. But if you're in behavioral assessment, how can you lead If you
Yeah.
lead, they are a reflection of your interaction, your projection. It's not a true representation of them. I mean, if I look at the one thing that's brought up in court dramas, whether you work there and you've seen it often, we've all seen a court drama. Objection, Your Honour, leading the witness, leading. It's right there. It's right there from the get go, and the big one that seems to either affect people really, really badly, or people just don't mind it at all. There's rarely a middle ground. Is silence, right? It's
Mm.
silence. It's this reflection of how a cognitive load is socially distributed. So in these collective leaning cultures, China, great example. Silence allows the group to regulate the hierarchy and preserve any coordination that's in there. In more individual leaning cultures, England, by comparison, certainly America, anything that you would describe as the Western world, silence really transfers cognitive load back onto the individual and is very often read as uncertainty. You know,
Mm.
and this is a big bugbear of mine with the way that communication is going. The push towards efficiency, the push towards speed, now
Yeah.
go, where any point, I think I said it in a video the other day, where any point that takes longer than a tweet to be made is written off as disinteresting or a lack of clarity,
Yeah.
simply because somebody's taken a little bit more time, been a little bit more contemplative about what it is that they're going to say and delivered their thoughts on the matter. Silence is a weird thing, don't you think?
Oh, yes, it certainly is. And, I was thinking as you were speaking there about this can be used as a trigger in conversations, especially if you're trying to influence someone or you want someone to give you some information, is just to allow, because we've got these things, adjacency pairs, haven't we, where we say something and we expect someone to say something back that's joined to it. Whereas if you
Absolutely.
break that and you just let them speak and you don't answer, in our kind of context that we operate in the UK, especially, is that person will more undoubtedly feel very uncomfortable and will fill that space because
Yeah.
we've broken the rules of our version of communication. Whereas
Yeah.
when you're talking to someone, I've done a lot of work in Singapore, Malaysia, and
Yeah.
you talk to people there, and it's quite unnerving to start with when you say something which you would normally get that response to, and they look at you and smile,
Yeah.
and it just sits there for what seems like an inordinate long,
Yeah.
long period of time. But really, it's just, and this is what I found from working in
Excuse
that
me.
culture, um, is that they're more about building relationships. They're more about listening and being deliberate, and they're looking to build a story out of every conversation, and I don't know, I'm not in their mind, so I don't know. But I would think that's what they think about afterwards. I would think that in those type of conversations, they probably walk away thinking, wow, I've really learned a lot about that guy, about not just the work,
Yeah.
about, the person. And I
Yeah.
don't think, like you say, I think um, I always say, don't rush to get things wrong because we do tend to do that in conversational terms, especially. I think the chance of miscommunication is probably higher in the type of conversations that we would have day to day than it is in that type of conversation where you're putting thoughtfulness into it and being deliberate with it and taking time. And certainly in the work I do with whoever I'm working with, that's what I advocate. There's no quick route to getting to an end. The end is there, and you get to it by deliberate thought. Um,
Yeah.
being mindful, if you want, with the other person.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like if somebody were to say something really profound, or something really massive, like I don't know. Imagine some hypothetical where somebody's solved the common cold. You go, like, what do you say to something like that in a moment? Words don't feel right. Like, if you say, "I love you" to your partner, and they, almost quite churlishly say, "Why?"
Mm.
How do you answer a big question like that without taking some time to? And I realize all questions aren't going to be that big and massive and profound, and that kind of um, uh, 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 specific, but it was just as an example.
Yeah,
If you don't take the time to process something, you can't understand how deep it actually sinks. And
yeah,
one of the one of the things that I like, I mean, it's a very dry topic to put cards on the table to anyone listening, but I like it. It's got its connections for communication from the Foundation for Critical Thinking. They have a guy's work on there, Dr. Richard Paul, who speaks about the 8 elements of reasoning and the 9 standards of all thought. All thought. And two of the 9 standards is that of depth and breadth.
yeah,
And depth is the room to explore that one point, and breadth is just touching the surface on a lot of specific things. And it's certainly an idea that has been researched at MIT as well. Good book that I've spoken about a few times, Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle.
mm,
Where the need to fill a moment with speed or words, or not really allowing moments to sit, is a risk of depth in a situation. And I know from all of the relationships that I have, both business and personal alike, I certainly see and feel and take a lot of value from how deep they are. If
mm,
if it is if it is that I'm going to enter into a working partnership with somebody, of any kind of connection, it's not like we've got to make friendship bracelets and braid each other's hair kind of thing, but that it's a little bit more contemplative, a little bit more purposeful, a little
yeah,
bit more specific, regardless of any kind of cultural influences that are there. I don't just want to turn up and go, right, come on, let's talk about cross-cultural communication, and then we cancel the call. Right, see you next week. That type of thing doesn't make for productive communication and conversation. It might be difficult at first, but then you almost abductively reason: is it only difficult because the culture that I'm living in tries to push towards the convenience of gap filling, so you don't have to sit in that moment of ambiguity?
yeah, yeah. One of the things that's come to my mind is I use LinkedIn a lot. I usually post a couple of times a week, and one of the persons that interacts with me is called Gopal, and he's of Indian descent. I
Mm,
think he lives in the US now, but I think he's of Indian descent, and I love when he answers, because no matter what I'll put on there, he always has a different perspective on it, a much deeper perspective, and it's usually from his high context upbringing, etc. And he's obviously highly read and everything, and he could turn a meaningless thing that I've put on there, very surface level maybe. He adds a lot of depth to it, and I really value that. I think it's really good. But part of me, when it first happened, was, oh wow, is he sort of saying that I'm stupid or something? But he's not. It's just dialogue, isn't it?
yeah,
And we shouldn't be afraid of that.
yeah,
And I think that holds us back a lot, is this thing about our opinions, are usually disputes, aren't they?
Of course.
I think we've got used to that here. Is that when people are going to have an opinion about what we've done, it's usually going to be negative.
Mm.
Whereas actually, having had that experience of different cultures and the way they deal with that, a lot of their opinions are just mechanisms to take the conversation forward.
Yeah.
Um, and just like humor doesn't travel so well in some cultures. And emotional expression again, is some cultures. I mean, I've been on courses where people have told me things in the break about their family and all that, and I've only just met them.
Yeah.
They want to engage with you and they want to drag you into their
Yeah.
world, sort of. And other people from other countries are so standoffish.
Mm.
They don't want you to go there at all, and that's
Yeah.
very much like we get that in all conversations we can have. You can have those, but they are pronounced, and that's where I say that's where knowing where the line is, and sometimes we have to go into spaces we're not comfortable with to get that connection with the people that we're with, and it's just judging what they're doing it for, really.
Absolutely. And we speak about learning about other people through behavioral intelligence and observation, or the
Yeah.
many other synonyms that are connected to it, and certainly as an extension of last week's discussion in individual leaning cultures, the opinions they are often experienced as extensions of the self, right?
Mm,
So you are much more likely, even from a simple statistical analysis, just of the numbers, you are much more likely to get into these perceptions of cultish behavior in
mm,
the individual leaning cultures than you are the collectivist ones, purely from how the discourse and the influence around these kinds of ideologies are enforced, are engendered, are suggested, are influenced, and the many other connections around that. Is there any shock when you bump into someone online, even a keyboard warrior of sorts, maybe a bot,
mm,
someone's hiding behind a profile pic, and it's you can almost water down their point to "you're wrong and I'm right"
yeah.
without any exploration in between. You go, individual leaning culture right there, where wherever that is. And that's not as a certainty. That's just an observation.
Yeah.
It's a likely inclination just on how these things are influenced within the culture that is growing. You
Mm.
know. So with that in mind, folks, we will draw today's conclusion now. Bob, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think underneath everything that we've talked about is what I firmly believe is that every conversation we go in, you go into it accepting that that person is unique. They're just them. And if you go in there with as little perception bias as you can about who they are and what they might be, then the better it is, because we are all individuals, and you know the behavior we have is just the behavior we have. And if we want to get connections, we have to align ourselves with that behavior. And so, in that respect, what we do, and I say we as opposed to some other methods of doing it, is that we just see everyone as a blank canvas and we add the brush strokes to it as we're going along.
That's it. That's it. Wonderful thoughts to leave it on. So, guys, if you've got anything out of this, don't be strangers. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to the channel through which you obtain this podcast from. Hit the notification bell, and you'll be notified every time another episode is released. And until such time as we actually see you, we'll probably talk with you next week. All right, guys. See you later.
Bye.